So way back in 2022, I got my hands on a Fender Player Strat, and it felt like a really big deal. This was going to be my first Mexican Strat since my parents had gifted me one in 2014 for Christmas, and that thing was long gone. So I was really excited to see just how many changes they had made to the lineup, and also how they were going to stack up with the modern line of American guitars. You see, my main Strat at the time was this G&L Legacy that I'd been using for about 3 years, so I wondered if I was ever going to really develop a connection with this random Strat that was about half the retail price. But once it got here, I started playing it and practicing a little bit more. Then I would start bringing it to church every once in a while, and then I would start using it on Instagram videos, and it became the first of that series that really stuck with me. That is until one day where I was experimenting with how much expensive pickups actually matter in a guitar, where with the help of my friend Sean, I was actually able to switch out the stock pickups for Cunafes. It was like I gained this whole new love for this guitar because it wasn't just that one random Mexican Strat that I have anymore. It was my own specific Frankenstein's monster that I knew very few people would have something similar to. And seeing how well that went, I started to do more and more alterations with the pickups and the pick guards and the pots, to the point where outside of the body and the neck, it really didn't resemble that much of a Fender Player at all. And that really hit me about a year ago when Fender decided to release their Player 2 series. Now, usually in this kind of a scenario, I would immediately get my Player 1, start playing through it, and just comparing it to everything that I was seeing on YouTube. But because I had made so many alterations to it, it was nothing like the guitar it had once been, and to be completely honest, I had forgotten mostly what the Player series was even supposed to be like. That was until one day when I got this package. But this wasn't just a Player series or even a Player 2, this was a Player 2 modified, and I really didn't know what that meant. What is the point of the modified? Who is this guitar for? And what is Fender even still doing in that price range? All of these questions rang in my head. I knew the only way to answer those would be to actively experience the guitar in person, so that's what I did. I think because I haven't opened a Player series in a while, I just have all these questions like, what kind of case does it come with? What kind of strings are gonna come on it? I have no idea what to expect. Here we go, because this is really like the moment of truth where we're gonna see this thing for the first time. I'm glad they're going away from the Paw Pharaoh and going back to the Rosewood, but on first look, it looks pretty good. We're gonna have to see what these noiseless pickups are all about. So there's no humbucker, but it does have a push-pull, so I'm wondering what that's gonna even do if it's not a coil split. So I'm really curious to see how noiseless these noiseless pickups actually are, and also to compare it to like similar guitars in the price range. Like, I wanna play this after playing my Sire, or play it after playing the Pacifica. And that's exactly what I did over the next week. I started playing it just about every day, and I finally began to put my thoughts together. So here's the deal. I feel like it's time that I give you a much more formal introduction now that I understand this a lot better than when I first opened it last week. So this is a Player 2 modified. And it's really interesting because when I first started looking up reviews on the Player 2 just to get some more context on what had changed in the almost 3 years since I had gotten my Player series, there were a couple of key points that everyone seemed to be hitting on. Those being rolled fingerboard edges and changing from Paw Pharaoh to Rosewood. Now, that made a lot of sense to me because I started thinking back even to some of the more expensive Fender guitars that I really loved, like the Stevie Ray Vaughan signature that had Paw Pharaoh as the one single thing kind of holding it back. And even in thinking competition wise, which Fender has to other brands, you see in this price range people starting to put Rosewood, even ebony, in their guitars on their necks. So you're like, okay, it makes sense that they were going to have to step it up. With the modified series, I feel like they're trying to do a similar thing because this guitar essentially has all of those same features, the Rosewood neck, the rolled fingerboard edges, but that's when you start to run into some of the differences in the new stuff. Locking tuners, a tusk nut, and the most significant being noiseless pickups, but this time with a small twist that I hadn't actually seen before. You see, I have very little experience with noiseless pickups, especially when it comes to Fender guitars. So one of the things that I was really excited to do was to plug this thing in to my noisiest amp, like the one with the most vintage character, to see how it would really handle itself. But even more than just canceling out hum, I needed to see if these pickups could actually hold up, and that's when I went to work. my biggest concern just from having read more about noiseless pickups was what the top end was going to be like, especially once I started getting past the neck position. But to me, it didn't feel like I was losing too much. And depending on which guitar I was plugging in and comparing this to, the loss of hum more than made up for any top end or any like sparkle that I might have been losing. That's coming from someone who's desperately trying to learn to appreciate the middle positions on a Strat more, because it's not something that I ever used on a regular basis, whether I was live or just jamming with people. It's really new to me, even though this has always been my thing. Now, once I had gotten past my middle position phobia, I had to make my way to the bridge, and that's where this started to get really interesting, because I noticed there was a push-pull, which didn't make a lot of sense to me at the time, because I was like, there's no humbucker in this circuit, there's not going to be a coil split. But that's when I started reading up on it and realized that this actually adds the neck pickup to the circuit. Now, that's not something I had ever personally played with on a guitar, but once I started doing the research, I noticed that this is actually something that Fender had done before in the American Pro 2 series, but I didn't know about it because my American Pro 2 has a humbucker and it's just like a coil split. And my initial thought was completely off, because my thinking was that the purpose of this was just going to be to give a little bit of roll off to the bridge single coil for people like me who don't necessarily like that type of thing on a Strat. But it's actually a completely different sound in itself once you start adding the neck to the bridge. And it's the same exact thing where you're getting a completely new sound, neck, middle, and bridge once you get to the 2 position. Now, my biggest complaint with this has little to do with the sound and more to do with the fact that this is a push-pull instead of a push-push like on some of the higher-end models, and it can get a little annoying, but I guess that's what you're paying for with more of the higher-end guitars. So at the end of the day, what did we learn? And I think it's really interesting because I never played the Player 2, it really does feel like I'm experiencing 2 different aspects of this for the first time. And strictly when it comes to the Player 2 aspect, I was quite impressed, especially when it came to just the feel of the neck and having rosewood back, because I've played a lot of guitars that are way cheaper than this that I think sound really, really good, that punch way above their weight class. But some of the problems when it comes to some of the cheaper guitars is they just don't have the neck feel, and that's really determines whether something is worth spending that extra money on. Now, on the other end of this, when it comes to the pickups and the new wiring, I was also pretty impressed. Now, I still haven't played the Vintera 2, so I'll have to do a comparison one of these days, but it does feel like the biggest difference between these 2 guitars, knowing that they're about $100 difference, and depending on what you want in the Player 2 mod, you're probably going to be looking at about the same price, is going to be whether or not you prefer the modern feel or whether you're all about what the Vintera 2 is clearly supposed to be, which is that vintage feeling Strat. So I guess it really all just depends what you want. But I think that's the most important thing, because it doesn't really matter what I want, what matters is what you want. So please let me know in the comments, What do you think of the Fender Player 2 series? Do you think it was an upgrade from the Fender Player 1 and it was worth it? Do you think the Player 2 mod with the noiseless pickups is like a good idea, or are you not about it? Please let me know in the comments. Anyways, thank you so much for watching this video. Having played a bunch of different Fender competitors more recently, like the Sterlings, like the Sires, and like one I can't tell you about yet, but I think it's going to be pretty exciting soon, and seeing a lot of those guitars get a lot better over time at some lower price ranges, I've been wondering what Fender's been doing with their Mexican line, especially with things like the Player 2 mod, to try and stay in that competitive aspect. And I think it'll be really interesting to see not only what they do next, but to experience some of these other Player 2 mods, because there were so many different others in the Player mod series. There were the ones with the Floyd Rose, there were the HSS, and it'll be interesting to see how those compare. If you want to know anything more about where I got this guy right here, I got it from the new homies at Fender, and I'll have all the links in the description. It's one of the best ways to support the channel if that's something you want to do, or if you're just curious about any of the other gear that I use in this video, amps, pedals, mics, even the camera that I'm using. Make sure to check out those links. Thank you so much to all my patrons. There's some extra exclusive content on there if you want to join the community. Like and subscribe if you had a good time, and most importantly, like most important of all, it's a Strat summer, baby.